welcome to the new episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies. I'm Steven.
And I'm Dakota.
And tonight we're going to do another one of our video reviews. And we'll be discussing the Oscar-winning... I don't know why I'm blanking. Film. I don't know why it was so hard to say the word film. The Oscar-winning film for, was it just Best Original Score? Was that the only thing it won for?
It wasn't. I'm thinking here. Best Original Screenplay, or was that something else?
No, I think it was just score.
Oh, I know it was nominated for a few. Sadly, it lost out pretty much in every category.
Sadly or deservedly, hard to know. I don't know what was nominated in every category, but the movie, The H8ful Eight, is the one we'll be discussing tonight. A Western of sorts, but not really. It's more of, that's the time period it uses, more so than actually being what most Americans would call a Western, so to speak. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, although it'd be hard to imagine this story taking place at any other time.
Right, yeah, the things that are in this story...
Actually...
Cell phones would hurt it. No, just kidding.
Actually, I think medieval times. I'd like to see this story set in medieval times.
And instead of a haberdashery, it could be like some sort of tavern or something like that.
Exactly. They're on their way to York to hang this woman, and they get stuck.
Oh, York. Yeah, there you go. And then they just have a dragon show up at the end. I don't know why. Just for the heck of it.
Yeah, a dragon comes out of nowhere and kills them all.
But yeah, anyway, it did just win for Best Achievement in Music Written for a Motion Picture. Or what most people just say Best Original Score.
Yeah.
But it was nominated for Jennifer Jason Leigh's performance. She was up for Supporting Actress. And for cinematography, mostly just because of the fact that it was shot on film in Panavision 70mm. So that Quentin's reasoning for wanting to do that was he wanted to have, the mile-wide shots, that the old Westerns were kind of famous for. And so, yeah, the movie really opens with... Jeepers. What, just 5 minutes of panning over long, wide shots as the music brings you in?
You kind of mentioned earlier how this isn't your typical Western, but that is kind of something that Sergio Leone used a lot in his movies. And oddly enough, Ennio Morricone, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right. It's Italian. In case you couldn't tell. But he's the one who usually did the scores for his movies, wasn't it?
Yes. For quite a few of them. He did a lot of the famous Western scores that are probably flooding through your head right now. The ones you think of. Most of those were... Yeah, I don't know how you say his name. When I read it in my head, it comes out as Ennio Morricone. But I might be giving him a few extra syllables. I have no idea. But it sounds cool. Ennio Morricone! So yeah, this story, what would you say this story's about, the plot? There's 8 people that hate each other.
There's sadly only just a few more of that actually in the film, but it starts with a bounty hunter escorting his prisoner to this town where she can be hanged, and the bounty hunter, his name is John, played by Kurt Russell, sporting
it's actually more played by Kurt Russell's mustache.
Yeah. Sporting, I believe, I think it's called the Walrus, is what that's called.
Yeah, it's kind of the walrus, but it attaches to his sideburns also. So it's kind of like, I don't know, the walrus hammock. I don't know.
Wasn't that the style made famous by Wilford Brimley?
Well, I don't know. He kind of Wilford Brimley would have been the walrus.
Yeah.
When it comes around and connects to your sideburns, it's almost more like, General Burnside's, the guy who gave the name to sideburns, is almost more kind of similar to what he did. But either way, period-fitting facial hair.
Yeah, I know up until recently he was still sporting that, I don't know what you want to call it, mustache. The mustache of mustaches.
He used it in a few other films he was in. Like, he made another more independent Western around the same time he made Hateful Eight. And then I want to say there was something else he was in where he kind of had, a still pretty decent mustache. But, hey, if you can grow a mustache that cool, you might as well get some use out of it, man. So
yeah, he sported a pretty handsome mustache / beard in The Thing.
Yeah, that's right, his beard. But yeah, so it's kind of him. He's in a stagecoach, and he's handcuffed to a woman played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, about the only woman in the movie. And yeah, there's a huge bounty on her head, and so he's taking her to be hung. And along the way, he runs into a colonel played by Samuel Jackson, who's also a bounty hunter of sorts.
I think he was a major, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, major. Sorry. But he's a bounty hunter that's more of the, if they say dead or alive, I'm going to go with dead. Whereas Kurt Russell's bounty hunter would have been more he's the one who wanted to see them hung, which is why he had the nickname the Hangman. But yeah, so these two end up going along the way, and they're kind of the stagecoach drivers trying to outrun this blizzard, and they end up making it to this haberdashery, just kind of a general store, restaurant, B&B, kind of an all-in-one deal to get out of the blizzard, where they meet kind of the rest of our eclectic cast in this place, and it's kind of becomes, in a way, there's a lot of people that don't seem like they are who they say they are, and it kind of becomes kind of figuring out what everybody's game here is, like who's on the level and who's just throwing out crap, and so it kind of becomes a little bit of that. And of course you have these bounty hunters, and they're the most suspicious because obviously they're taking in criminals, and so it causes them to be suspicious. And so you have this kind of story. But let me remind you once again, this is a Quentin Tarantino movie, and so in a normal person's movie, there would be that plot, but and there is, but he likes to have basically a movie that consists of, I don't know, 8 major scenes.
Yeah.
And each scene is basically 20 minutes of just flat out dialogue, or so it's just like, if you're not familiar with him, it's a lot of people know him for other things, content to his movies, but probably the thing he does more than anything is just have dialogue, just talk. He can make long movies, and these movies probably have more words in them than any other movie ever made.
Yeah, that's true. He's, people kind of accuse him of having a lot of violence in his movies, but the flip side of that is there's no real action. He's not like, this isn't John McTiernan we're talking about here.
The only exception would be Kill Bill, but it was because he was making a martial arts movie, where you say that had action.
Yeah. But for the most part, his movies aren't like a Rick-rollicking ride of action. It's kind of just people talking, and occasionally someone's going to get shot or, stabbed.
Yeah, something of the sort. Like it's like Dakota pointed out, he's not the John McTiernan who would be the director of like Die Hard and Predator, or your Michael Bay type movie where it's like blow up first, talk later type thing. And so it really just ends up being his movies are just a lot of listening and you sitting there trying to decide if any of this dialogue is important to the plot, and how you have to listen to everything and figure out what is important to the plot and what isn't. But I don't know. What is his reasoning behind his dialogue-heavy movies? Because he has some that, like, I've seen scenes from some of his movies where it's just like, it goes on and on and on. It doesn't really feel like it has anything to do with the actual plot of the movie.
Yeah, I think...
what's his reasoning behind that? Do you know?
He's just kind of trying to... His big thing is, like, character motivation, what's going on in their head. The screenplay that he originally wrote that eventually became Natural Born Killers was actually so huge that 2 movies came out of it, Natural Born Killers and True Romance. That is how much...
Both were made by well-known directors.
Yeah, and it's just... He just throws in so much, and I think those are still... They have, like, the Tarantino touches to them. A lot of dialogue, violence, kind of a lot of scenes where they're driving in cars talking. But they're not Tarantino-esque in a way that still a lot of action, kind of less dialogue-y. But yeah.
Dialogue-y.
I don't know if that's a thing. Less dialogue-driven movies.
It's okay. I like to make up words, too. Yeah, and so, this story, or this movie, I mean, just like all his other movies, he has a tendency to, reuse people he likes or like to work with him, whichever way that goes, or both ways. But when he does bring in people who aren't necessarily his quote-unquote usual suspects, he always has a tendency to bring in well-known, well-respected actors or actresses. Why do you think that is, Dakota?
I'm not really sure, considering that's not how he started out. His first 2 big movies, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction. He didn't really use a lot of the well-known actors.
Well, they were guys who weren't necessarily well-known yet, except for like maybe Harvey Keitel.
Bruce Willis. He used pretty famously. John Travolta. He pretty much revived his career.
Well, and that's the other thing he's famous for is he'll pull these people into his movies where people are like, why is he using that person? And then there's been a few times where that has caused a renaissance for that actor.
Yeah, Robert, we were just talking about this earlier. Robert Forster, actually.
Yeah, he ended up getting an Academy Award nomination for
Jackie Brown.
Yeah. And it revived his career. It ended up, because that would have been when he was like middle-aged.
Yeah.
And it gave him kind of a new start to where, he can be a crime boss now in movies. And
Yeah.
And he played that even up until he was in the TV show Heroes, being basically a crime boss.
Yeah, oddly enough, didn't do that for Pam Grier, but it generated a lot of interest for kind of the movies she was in when she was younger.
Oh, it kind of revived people looking back at her.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were just saying, a lot of younger people were probably like, who's this Pam Grier person? Even though Tarantino was a huge fan of hers, and she actually got name dropped in Reservoir Dogs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's these characters are sitting in the car, and this guy's describing this woman. He's like, she looked like Pam Grier from this movie. And Tim Roth's character is like, that wasn't Pam Grier, that was so-and-so. Pam Grier was in... Yeah, I can't quote the movie.
There you go. But that would have been a scene where it's like he extends this whole conversation into a whole kind of side tangent that ends up going back into the plot. And it's just kind of interesting how he does that, which is why some people think he's like one of the greatest movie makers there is.
Yeah.
And why some people find his movies frustrating in that they can be hard to follow along sometimes. But as far as this movie, you have Bruce Dern. He'd be the more veteran of this movie, although Kurt Russell you can consider a veteran just because, man, he's been acting since he was, in diapers practically. And you had Samuel Jackson, which we named, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Michael Madsen, Tim Roth, a few others that aren't quite as well known also showed up in this, and As far as the acting, I guess I thought the acting was fine. I will say this. Kurt Russell, it like the way he delivered his lines and stuff, it's like it felt like he was in a different world than everybody else. Or like in a different movie.
Yeah, it's almost like he was trying to channel Lee Marvin.
Well, yeah, it was like everything he said almost felt like he was over. I don't know if it wasn't necessarily overacting. It was almost like he was overreacting. Is almost more would be a better term for what was happening with him, like the way he said everything. And I feel like some of it was maybe he was trying to channel his inner tough guy, but he didn't want to just be Snake or something like that, or and so he's trying to find like his cowboy tough guy, and that's kind of how it came across. But I mean, he was still fine. Everybody played their parts really well. I mean, I thought that went over really well. Wouldn't you say that too, Dakota?
Yeah, kind of one of the surprises from this movie was Walt. I don't know if it's Walter or Walton Goggins.
It's Walton Goggins.
Walton, yes. He was kind of a little bit of fresh air in this because he's someone that I think this is the first Quentin Tarantino movie he's ever been in, and
sure,
it was hard.
I don't know.
It was hard from the get-go to try to figure out what he was doing. Because he kind of came off as being, a little bit of
an idiot.
Yeah, but at the same time, you could tell that there was more going on with him than he was letting on, and then that brings up the question: well, why is this guy just walking around out in the cold?
Yeah,
it's almost like he's waiting. He was waiting to get picked up for some reason, and then of course. This the story kind of takes a turn. I felt it kind of developed out of the middle of nowhere, but Kurt Russell's character believes that somebody that they're stuck with in the haberdashery is also working with his prisoner. Yeah,
when I get that they were suspicious. So, like if you're a bounty hunter, especially when you're bringing in a living bounty, you're going to be a little suspicious. But I felt like his just like outcry of accusation really felt like where did that come from, except that the screenplay told you to do that. It just felt you know what I mean, where it was like it's like here this movie was slowly building to everything, but that one thing that really set up the rest of the movie felt like, where did that come from, where all of a sudden he's just like, I know one of you in here is helping her, and it's like, well, that's kind of something, don't you just initially think in your head, but maybe you don't. I mean, he just was like immediately knowing it's a reality. But I don't know. I guess maybe you're supposed to chalk it up to he's an experienced bounty hunter and he could just tell.
I don't know. I guess something probably with the situation didn't sit right with him. I mean, it's that same Samuel L. Jackson's character does that same thing, but he has reasons for it. Whereas Kurt Russell's character right away just kind of...
Again, he was in a different movie. No.
Maybe they were reading from a different script.
Yeah. Here's what's funny about this movie to me. Everything it was nominated for at the Oscars, I was like, cinematography? Yeah, it makes sense. Jennifer Jason Leigh's performance makes sense. The thing it won for is the one thing one of the things I didn't like about this movie.
What's that?
The music, the score.
Yeah,
I thought that half the time it was really distracting because it would just start up and then instead of like kind of floating out of the scene, it would just like cut off. Like it would just go, meh, and it was like done. And then it would just be like the next thing. And there was like only like a few times in the whole movie where I thought the music like even worked.
It kind of seemed like it was made to be put in a horror movie. Just kind of...
Well, yeah, there was a couple parts like that. And I don't know if it's trying to be misleading, because the one part it felt like, well, maybe the movie's trying to mislead us to think that something bad is going to happen here.
Yeah, I think the score for this movie would have felt more at home, you know, on a remake for The Shining or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. And then it was just like, I don't know. It was just kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It was just like it wasn't like outright bad, where it was like ugh, but it just felt like it didn't fit the movie or what was going on half the time. And so that was kind of weird to me. And like I said, ironically, it was the thing that the movie won for. But we talked about this, how Ennio, we'll assume that that's how you say his first name, has been doing movies forever and has done a lot of, I'm going to drop a term, iconic. He's done a lot of iconic scores, to where was this like we're going to give you your Oscar before you die, and it's not posthumously given honorarily type thing.
Yeah, that's the problem with the Academy Awards. They don't really, sometimes I feel, reflect the true nature of which was better or which was more deserving of the Oscar.
Well, this is gonna end up being controversial, but even the Best Picture winner this year, it's controversial because a lot of people are probably like, "Well, that movie's great," but I just feel like that movie won because it was kind of the right little darling to win, but maybe not the best movie that was up for Best Picture.
Yeah, there was...
And I think it's a movie that, since most of the people in Hollywood are morally ambiguous to just kind of scumbags themselves, they just like to give the Best Picture to the movie that feels like, oh, it's the movie where good people are doing good things, and so I'm going to be a good person, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't as controversial a win as Crash, but it certainly, I don't think, was the movie of the year, not even close.
Yeah.
There are actually some people that say that Mad Max actually ruined the chances for the true movie of the year.
Which was?
The Revenant.
Okay.
Mad Max had a lot of fans, I guess. I don't know. I'm one of them, though. It was
just surprising it had 10 nominations.
Yeah.
And it won like
It won
5 or 6, but they were all for like the technical stuff.
Yeah, costumes.
So, yeah, I mean, so there's that whole thing with this movie, but besides that, I guess, just how did you feel like just the overall? Let's just go to the overall. Put everything together. Where do you, as someone who's seen most of Tarantino's movies, I would assume, or all of them?
Yes, I've seen all of them.
Where would you put this on would you put this near the top out of the 8 films that he's written and directed? Would you put this near the top or middle or bottom?
Probably toward it. Something you're going to realize when you first watch this movie. This is the 8th film by Quentin Tarantino.
The 8th one that he himself has.
Which is pretty amazing because he's been making movies for over 20 years and he's only on number 8. He took a huge kind of break in between Jackie Brown and Kill Bill, supposedly to perfect the script that was eventually became Kill Bill. But
I think some of that too was that Pulp Fiction was such a force to be reckoned with that a lot of people think why Jackie Brown failed was because it was like, well, this is different than Pulp Fiction, because it was the next movie he did after. Yeah. And so maybe another reason he took the break was like, let's just kind of I need to move out of the shadow of my own movie so that I can do something new and people hopefully won't compare it as bad.
Yeah, he's kind of fickle about his movies. He really is. And he tends...
Nice word drop, by the way.
He tends to say a movie of his is critically just kind of just a disappointment. He will actually kind of disown that movie. He did it with Jackie Brown. He did it with the first movie he did with Kurt Russell, the Death Proof movie. He's not
one of the Grindhouse features, in case you're like confused about what that was.
Yeah, he wasn't. He's not. He doesn't like to talk about that movie too much either. But
which is weird because if any of you remember at the time when it came out, he was touting it as like, oh, one of the things he's been most excited to do, and yada yada yada, double feature with blah blah blah, and then it was like, yeah, I don't count that or something, and it's like,
I think the problem with that one was everyone was pretty much saying, skip Death Proof, just go see Robert Rodriguez's Grindhouse movie, which I'm having trouble remembering the title of.
Planet something, wasn't it? Planet Terror?
Yeah, Planet
like
Terror. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'd place this one more towards the top. It's obviously Pulp Fiction's going to be number one. I consider the two Kill Bill movies just one.
Okay.
That's kind of how they were supposed to be in the first place. He kind of just, the script, once again, was so huge, he just cut it into two movies. Kill Bill would probably be second. Reservoir Dogs, and probably this one.
Okay, so you'd put it in your top 4 then anyway. So it made it into your top, I guess most people use the term top 5. So
Yeah.
it's in your top 5 anyway?
Yeah.
Out of 8.
Yes.
So I guess it's technically middle.
Yeah. It's the middle child.
It's the middle child.
Which is probably why it didn't get no love at the Oscars.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Because it did get, even among his dedicated followers, there was a little bit of a mix to this. But I think some of it was this was one where people were really having trouble placing it because they're like, well, he does all of his movies differently, and wasn't Django Unchained his 19th century movie?
Yeah.
And now and then people are like, well, yeah, this one takes place in the 19th century, but it's more of like a whodunit. And then they're like, and then people are like, it wasn't a whodunit, it was, and it was like, it was a, what do you call it? A stage. He made it like a stage play because it's mostly one location. And,
yeah, you could really take this movie and turn it into a stage play if you tried. That'd involve a lot of blood squibs, though. Keep that in mind.
Well, or as they use in the Shakespearean days, red hankies pulled out of your shirt.
Yes. I don't know.
Or leg.
It's like we said, it's not a traditional Western. A lot of his movies are hard to peg down. Reservoir Dogs is meant to be kind of like one of those, almost like a, I'm not even sure what they call it, but a caper. And
yeah, it was like Reservoir Dogs was a heist movie that told you everything about the heist without showing the heist.
Yeah.
It's basically
you saw the before and the after. You didn't see the actual heist.
That's how I had it described to me anyway. But so let's just go into maybe like final thoughts on this movie, grade you would give it, and those type of things. So Dakota, what
like
are
like a letter grade?
Yes.
Okay. There are certain things that really work for this movie. It was interesting to watch Samuel L. Jackson kind of be the main character in this movie, because usually in a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies, he's either kind of the side character or somebody that's just kind of narrating what's going on in the movie. But
Sure.
But I liked him. We saw an interesting turn from interesting kind of character from Channing Tatum. Anyone there, he's kind of popular right now. This is definitely not the way we're used to seeing him. And I don't know, it was interesting. So there was that.
So there was that.
Jennifer Jason Leigh, I feel like, I don't know, she was just kind of there. I didn't think she really.
She was kind of the plot driver.
Yeah, she was pretty much what this movie, I don't know, the Holy Grail was to Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail. I didn't think she did that great of a job. The score kind of seemed just out of place. I was expecting this place to get attacked by demons or, I don't know, zombie Native Americans. That would have been cool, I guess.
Zombies or Native Americans or zombie Native Americans?
Zombie Native Americans.
Yes.
Because
I'm feeling what's that? Dead Snow Part 3 where it's like zombie Native Americans versus zombie Nazis.
But it's just, the score just, I don't know. I didn't, it seemed kind of eerie. It kind of puts you on edge, like.
Yeah. And then at times it's just like, where is this coming from? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your grade then?
I'm going to give it, you know what? I'm going to go with B. I'm going to go with a B.
All right. He's giving a straight up B. I guess for me, this movie was interesting. Would definitely give it that. I mean, he's a guy who definitely, in his worlds, can create interesting people to fill it. And I thought everyone did a fine job with their roles. There was a few things, like, okay. I thought it was, I don't know, it's hard with him because he makes his movies purposefully over the top and fantastical. And so it's hard to know how to use that as a great job or whoa. And so it's kind of hard because he does make his movies and the world of his movies very fantastical. But yeah, the score, I don't know. It's just funny because we did a Batman v Superman and I really struggled to. I think it's because I'm a person who the music of a movie really can make or break it for me because it's such a driving force a lot of times in movies. And so I guess with all that said is I give it almost more of like a C+. Because I didn't abhor it, but I didn't really care for it a whole lot, and it was also way too long. It was way too long. It could have, and I get that it's like, oh, you want to flesh out your world. I get that. Believe me, I don't care if your movie is long, but it just felt like this didn't need to be long for what happened. And I'm not just saying that as a person who can struggle with ADD, because like I said, I don't mind if you have a long movie as long as it's kind of a progression that kind of means something. And again, that's where it's so hard to judge his movies, because it's like you could argue maybe it did mean something, but it didn't feel like, even if it meant something, it didn't feel like it mattered. And so maybe that's how I would put it. And so yeah, I'd give it like a C+. As far as my grade. But obviously, if you're a Quentin Tarantino fan, I would guess you've probably already seen this movie. And have your thoughts on it. If you're not a Quentin Tarantino fan or have never watched one of his movies, I don't know, Dakota, that's more your ballpark. Would this be a good one to start with?
Ooh, that's a tough one right there. I'm going to say no.
Okay, so let's say there's someone interested in the worlds he sets up. What would you say? Start with this before you get into H8ful Eight.
Here's the thing about H8ful Eight. It's kind of, the two movies, the first two that he did, I think everyone kind of keeps expecting that out of him. Where it was these movies about these criminals out doing what they do.
Yeah.
Whether it's thieves, low rent hitmen, mob bosses,
sure,
or in the case of Kill Bill, assassins, and it's just, I don't know.
That was another thing I had to do with this movie is I knew there'd be nobody I could cling to because they were all going to be. I knew going into this movie, it's called the H8ful Eight. So you kind of know everyone's probably going to be some form of scumbag.
Yeah,
and so this is a movie where if you're a person who has a tendency to cling to a character, which I can do, you kind of can't do that with this. You just kind of have to let it play out.
That's the problem. You see, that's I think the problem with this movie. You're not really rooting for anybody. You're kind of just just watching a house of cards fall.
I rooted for the Blizzard. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. You are just kind of watching a house of cards, and you're like, okay, when is the wind gonna get strong enough, or when's the table gonna get bumped, or however you want to say it. But yeah, so you'd start with maybe. I suppose that's what everybody would maybe say. Go back and if you're interested in Quentin Tarantino but haven't watched Pulp Fiction, then.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, the Kill Bill movies. You could kind of skip Jackie Brown and his Death Proof movie. Django Unchained. It really depends on how comfortable you are with casual racism. There is a lot of racism in that movie.
It's about slavery.
Yeah.
So.
Don't get offended, Steven, but I think, honestly, some people don't like that movie because it brings up a lot of feelings. We live in a new world right now where racism isn't tolerated, but as Ben Affleck found out not too long ago, we have these ghosts in these closets that were slave owners, and they didn't treat their quote-unquote property very well. And I think that movie kind of just brought that up and kind of made everybody just a little bit uncomfortable because
it's kind of, yeah, it's a tricky, when you do things like that, it's like, first off, you got to go into it saying, am I trying to help, or is this really going to hinder things, or is this going to make it worse? And I don't know. I didn't see Django, so I don't know where that goes on if it's really helping the problem. But yeah.
But yeah, I would definitely save that movie for last. It's not for everybody. I have a brother that loved it so much he named his dog after it.
He named his dog Unchained?
No.
I'm just kidding.
He named his dog Django. So now whenever now he comes home after a walk, he unhooks him, and he's like, he's unchained.
Oh boy, good one. I like that. That's interesting. But yeah, so that's kind of our feelings and thoughts on Hateful Eight, and just really the world of Quentin Tarantino in general. He's kind of one of those guys where you probably either don't know him in terms of never watch any of his movies, or you just hate him, or you love him. There just doesn't seem to be anyone who's just kind of like middle ground. You either just don't watch it, or you hate him, or you love him.
Yeah. Going to college, there was surprisingly few people that had seen his movies, but those that did were just, oh my God,
like zealots.
Pulp Fiction, greatest movie ever made.
Part of it is that it's like, you're told that that's what you're supposed to say. Like when you're trying to pass yourself off as a movie lover, it's like, oh, I guess I like, Citizen Kane and Pulp Fiction. It's like, what? Huh? That's when you know somebody's probably just throwing you for a loop. It's like,
yeah.
Citizen Kane and Pulp Fiction?
Yeah. They're keeping...
Just people, just be yourself. If your favorite movie is RoboCop, own it. If your favorite movie is Citizen Kane, own it. If your favorite movie is Killer Clowns from Outer Space, own it. Don't try to be something you're not.
Yeah, don't jump on the bandwagon, especially now, and try to say Star Wars was your favorite movie growing up. You know who you are.
You know you are.
I've been seeing a lot of you out there. But I know, and I want you to know I know.
I liked it a lot, but it wasn't my favorite. I'm more of a... I don't know. Favorite movie growing up? Jurassic Park? Really liked that one a lot.
Yeah.
Which we've talked about plenty in the past. But I think with that, we'll wrap up this episode. Like us on Facebook for all those things. We try to put stuff on there. Also, we are on Twitter if you want to follow us on there. We put some things on Twitter in the Twitterverse too. Tweeting and things like that. But also just subscribe to us in any way you listen to our podcast. or on YouTube. Just take advantage of those things to keep up on us. And it also just boosts our self-esteem with the show. Not really our personal self-esteem, but the self-esteem of the show, just knowing that you're there and you're paying attention and doing those things. So, So thanks for listening. This is Steven.
And this is Dakota.
Catch you later.